Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here on Wave Now. I'm Myra, and sorry, I hope that you are having an okay day so far here on this Tuesday. We're almost at noon, so almost Tuesday afternoon. If you all saw last night's football game, I know that it was heartbreaking for so many of you to see what happened to Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin, just 24 years old. He's now in critical condition in the hospital after suffering cardiac arrest when he collapsed mid-game against the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday. A lot of folks are wondering what happened to him and have concerns. It was just heartbreaking to see. His heartbeat was restored on the field and he was taken to a hospital, but the game was postponed. And of course, so many well wishes for him. If you have any well wishes that you would like to share for Hamlin, please post them here on social media. I know all the love and support and prayers do matter, and they make just to show support. So we are speaking with UofL Health today, talking with Chairman of Cardiology, UofL Health's Dr. Kim Williams. She's going to be talking with us, offering just some type of context and a medical perspective about what happened, what recovery could look like. Of course, this is not the doctor on Hamlin's case, but sometimes physicians see cases like this and can offer some sort of perspective. If you have children and they play sports, I'm sure this sort of thing is very concerning to you because you would hate to see something like this happen to your child. So we are waiting for the Zooms to start from UofL Health. Wanted to bring it to you live just so we could get a little bit more information about what happened to Hamlin, just 24 years old, suffering from cardiac arrest. This is definitely concerning. We haven't seen anything like this happen on a football field. So it's just heartbreaking to see. All right, it looks like the Zoom is getting started. So I'm going to pop in on it.
To record. So just stand by for the next 30 seconds or so. And of course, you all, I'll be recording on my end. And I will send this out to all of you as soon as we are done. And I will be pinning Dr. Williams, so it will be a clean feed where you will not have to worry about seeing me.
All right, just so stand by with us as we get started
Dr.
here.
Williams, you are pinned. Let me record on my end.
Got it.
Okay, excellent. So we are officially recording. Dr. Williams, if you wouldn't mind just saying and spelling your first and last name for us, as well as your position with UofL Health.
Dr. Kim Allen Williams, KIMWILLIAMS, and I'm chairman of internal medicine and a recovering cardiologist at here at Louisville.
So today we are talking about what happened during Monday Night Football last night. Damar Hamlin took a hit, stood up, and immediately collapsed on the field. From reports, we do know, he had gotten CPR. He was given oxygen on his way to the hospital. And then early this morning, we found out that doctors are saying it was cardiac arrest. And so we wanted to talk to you a little bit about, what may have been happening to cause that collapse on the field, and kind of just informing us, what is cardiac arrest? What might have been going on in his body?
So it's interesting that I'm not just a cardiologist, but I was a Little League coach. And in 1995, there was a huge report that came out of the New England Journal of Medicine that changed how we were actually doing Little League in terms of protection of the chest, because there were multiple reports of typically a hard hit ball or a hard thrown ball that would hit a young player in the chest at the right location, which is right in the middle of the sternum, okay, the breastbone, at the right time in the cardiac cycle, which happens to technically, for all you technical cardiac people out there, so-called the peak of the T wave. That is when the heart is recovering from its beat electrically. That's a sensitive time that we've all known about. If someone has an extra beat, for example, right there at that time, it has a nickname. It's called R on T. If you have an R on T, you can go into a bad rhythm. And so what we found out from that New England Journal of Medicine article is that we all had to do a better job of protecting the chest from contact that was at high velocity, because if you hit that vulnerable portion of the timing of the heartbeat, you could actually get set up an arrhythmia that could be fatal. And so we all started to do better in terms of chest protectors. Well, advance, 25, 27 years, and we had the situation that occurred last night. And watching the replay, it was a direct hit that he was actually part of to stop the player and make the tackle. And it was a direct hit of a helmet right onto the middle of the chest. Now, we typically do not, there's a Latin name for this that many people have started to hear. It's called commotio cordis, which means commotion of the heart. And the rhythm disturbance is basically a commotion, meaning that the rhythm that's set up is just chaotic. It has another name called ventricular fibrillation. And when that happens, you basically have to start cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR, really immediately. If you don't get blood flow to the brain. So the most important thing that we could talk about is two things. One is when it happens where people are knowledgeable, how quickly can you get the CPR going? And then how quickly can you get the electrical activity to restore itself using the shock? And everyone sees it on television, clear and shocking a person. That's really critical to get the electrical activity to restore itself. Now, and fast forward from an NFL game to our community, we really struggle with the knowledge of CPR and the application of automated external defibrillators, so-called AEDs, in our communities. We have huge disparities. And there's actually literature about specifically this issue of commotio cordis. The average age is 15. It usually doesn't occur over 20 years old, but this gentleman was 24 years old, still pretty young. And when it happens in the community, we have a huge ethnic disparity between survival of whites versus blacks because of our lack of knowledge in our community for doing the CPR immediately. That's what it's been attributed to. So I would say that this is a call for everyone to understand that chest contact can be dangerous, number one. And number two, we all need to know CPR. We all need to have CPR in our communities and know where our AEDs are to try to shock people, but at least doing the CPR.
And one question I have is, how rare is this commotio cordis? Because by the way you're making it sound, that hit has to be at a very particular time from the way that your heart is beating.
That's exactly right. And that's why it's extremely rare. And so there is a commotio cordis registry that actually has about 10 cases added every year from all the athletic events for all the young people. This is so incredibly rare that we just don't see it. And that's why it's really making the news, because people aren't aware of it.
And I want to talk about the importance of CPR, like you said, and what his recovery might be like, depending on how long he was down before that CPR was administered. I know from watching last night, they said he was on the field for about 9 minutes before he was in the ambulance getting oxygen, but we don't know exactly when CPR had started. How critical is that timing between hitting the ground and starting CPR? And what could that mean for his recovery?
His recovery is really totally dependent on how much circulation he's gotten. For those of us who are doing CPR and doing CPR training of people, it's really important to make sure that everyone remembers that we've changed based on good data how CPR is done. It's so-called compression only. It's still staying alive in terms of the frequency of how you do the compressions, but we don't try to do rescue breathings. We don't stop the circulation in order to do those rescue breathings. That is, we do much better with compression only CPR. Getting that word out is really important. Starting it early is really important. And so how his recovery will be, the good news is he did get some people to get some CPR going fairly quickly. I don't have the number of minutes. If it's more than 3 minutes, it might be more difficult recovery, more prolonged recovery, less total recovery. On the other hand, he's young and he's an incredibly fit elite athlete. So if anyone has a chance to come through a difficult situation like this, it would be this young man.
And of course, this is all speculation on our end, but what kind of, damage to his body or to his brain could there potentially be, depending on how long it took for him to get CPR?
So totally depends on how much oxygen was going to his brain with the circulation and how effective the CPR was. And I imagine it was actually very good. But the fact is, so-called anoxic brain injury, where you don't have enough oxygen going to your brain, can leave you with everything that you can imagine that your brain can do, not being able to do it. So everything from not being able to move to not being able to speak or understand to not actually being able to survive. On the other hand, if he got a CPR really quickly and got restoration of circulation to the brain, he could have a full and total recovery. Now, everyone seems to be asking, well, can he play again? Well, I would think that most people who end up in this situation would have a defibrillator typically, and you can't play a contact sport with a defibrillator in. It would just be too dangerous for the device itself, and then the device isn't going to help you. So I would say that it would be a rare circumstance to see him. That I can't imagine a circumstance where he would come back and play NFL again. But that's so far secondary to making sure that he survives and has survives first and has a good functional recovery.
And Dr. Williams, I know your time is valuable, so I'm going to open it up just to a few questions here. I know Paul Miles with WHAS Radio has his hand raised right now. So Paul, go ahead and unmute yourself so you can ask your question.
Hey, doctor, good morning.
Hi, Paul.
Sell me on the idea more of learning CPR, especially those of us who are maybe queasy about situations like that.
So I'm glad you're asking. So first of all, we understand the queasiness and people being not familiar with it. I actually tried to get a program going when I was chief of cardiology in Chicago at Rush University in the inner city, because there was a report that came out that said that African American children, when they arrest, do not generally get CPR. And that's because we just don't understand the fundamentals and how important it is. But there are cities, for example, in Seattle, Washington, where they just went on a campaign to get everyone that could possibly learn CPR to get them to understand it and actually do it. And that is the best place to have cardiac arrest if you're going to have one. You have it in Seattle where people know what they're doing. This is something that we can do at a city level, at a state level. And there are states, including Kentucky and Illinois, that have state laws that say that as part of high school, you're supposed to have CPR training. It's a law without a lot of teeth, and I'm not sure, what the rates of CPR and how knowledgeable people are since the laws have been passed. But we need to actually make sure that that's actually happening, and don't stop with high school. I think we should go to younger ages and to older people as well, so that everyone in the community knows how to do just the very simple basics of CPR, including compression only.
And UofL Health has some CPR trainings coming up, I believe, with the UofL basketball team in February. So I'll send out that information to you all when I send out this Zoom. Dakota with WDRB, she's got a question.
Yes, you mentioned earlier, I believe you said ages 15 to 20 or so is typical, and this is such a rare occurrence. Is there any reason why, when it does happen, it's typically with younger people?
So yes, and actually I wanted to say that the average age in that registry is 15, but as a Little League coach, I was thinking 10, 11, and 12. And that's because the breastbone is not as thick. And so there's less protection. And so as you get older and you have more tissue there, it's harder to, have trauma discharge your enough electricity at that perfect timing. But there's a long history of this. Sure, the report came out in 1995, but this is, a kung fu method, the touch of death. This has been going on for centuries, that if you hit the person at the right time in the right place, that you can get enough discharge to actually change the rhythm of the heart.
And then David Mattingly with WAVE, your question.
I love it that you are a former Little League coach. I'd like to ask you, put that hat on for me, and I'd like to ask you this question. after that report in 95, what sort of changes did you start seeing in Little League Baseball and organized sport for children as a result?
Actually, yeah, our biggest change was making sure that we had thicker chest protectors for the catcher. And as a coach, there was no way to put, so who is in line for a line drive and getting trauma? It's the pitcher. And so I've certainly taken a few shots right back at me throwing batting practice. And the best thing to do would be nice to put a chest protector on the pitcher, but we don't do that. And so I would actually seriously do a lot of drills. I also, before being a baseball coach with the wonderful courses that were on South Side Chicago White Sox, I was a professional tennis player. So I would actually take my pitchers and take a tennis ball and tennis racket and line forehands at them until they could catch them, just improve their reflex skills. And that actually seemed to work. We never got anybody hit by a line drive on the infield.
All right. Are there any more questions that need to be asked? Paul, I know your hand is still raised. I don't know if you have a second question or if you're good to go.
Oh, I'm good to go. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Any more questions, or Dr. Williams, anything else that you would like to add to give some context?
So I'm just really happy that you mentioned that U of L is actually doing some CPR training. Just want to mention that's also going on the West End. They're working with the high schools. And so I was taking over this job. I'm going to come in here and try to make sure that there's CPR training going on, and that oops, it was already here. And so it's an active process, and it's so good to partner. I'm hoping that we are very successful in getting everyone in the city of Louisville to understand CPR and perform it when it's necessary.
Stephanie, I see your hand raised. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Dr. Williams. I'm with the Courier Journal. I was wanting to ask about, out of hospital cardiac arrest versus this happening on an NFL field where there are 4 athletic trainers on each side of the field, just like it's in a situation where there is a full medical team almost, which isn't common. So can you talk about really being set up for success on an NFL sideline a little bit more versus like what you're saying in an inner city school or maybe any high school across Kentucky, or even some colleges that might not have access to these kind of resources?
So I think we're in better shape than we were in professional sports years ago. You might remember Loyola Marymount and Hank Gathers. He had a different condition. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is the name of that condition that sets people up for rhythm disturbances that can be fatal. And, there were not AEDs back then right available. We didn't have the staff. We didn't have the people who were really knowledgeable who could have saved his life. And started the compressions that happened last night. And so I think we're in a much better place in the stadiums and in professional sports and college sports and even high school sports than we ever were. There is some screening that goes on to try to look for the kinds of heart disease that can lead to serious rhythm disturbances. And, I've been involved when I was in Detroit, we did the Pistons, and then in Chicago, we did the Bulls. We try to make sure that people who are doing these high level of sports don't have any intrinsic heart disease that put them at risk. But like you're saying, that really doesn't apply to the community. We need a lot more work there.
Perfect. Thank you again, Dr. Williams, for your time. I really appreciate you. And I appreciate you all joining us today and kind of helping spread the word and raise some awareness there. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to stop recording and I will send this out to all of you in just a matter of minutes. Dr. Williams, thank you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Wave Now for this really helpful information that UofL Health provided Dr. Kim Williams about what could have possibly happened to Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin, who collapsed on the field last night during Monday night's game against the Cincinnati Bengals. He said it was more than likely a condition called commotion, I'm probably saying this wrong, so forgive me. It's Latin, commotio cordis, Latin for commotion of the heart. So David Mattingly is working on this story for us tonight. But one of the things Dr. Williams touched upon, how critical it is to know CPR and how so many of us don't. And in situations like this, CPR is absolutely vital. So UofL Health does provide classes on CPR training. So more information on all of this to come later here on Wave News. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Myra Ansari.